by eating lighter meat, but reducing the risk of a heart attack isn't preventing one. The only way you're going to prevent a heart attack is to get your cholesterol below 150. And eating lighter meats won't get you there. So what about that good fat in fish? Well, that good fat originally came from plants, the plants eaten by fish. So you're not only getting the good fat secondhand, but you're getting it in a package of bad fat, cholesterol, PCBs, pesticides, and other poisons. And calorie for calorie, shrimp have 6 times the amount of cholesterol as beef. To say eating fish is healthy because it contains a little good fat is like saying Twinkies is healthy because it contains a little calcium. And what about those dairy products? Dairy, in fact, has been called liquid meat because it contains just as much fat and cholesterol as red meat. Drinking 3 glasses of milk a day, as the dairy industry and our government recommends, gives you the same amount of artery-clogging cholesterol as eating 21 slices of bacon. A pint of ice cream is worth 24 slices of bacon. And at least one protein in dairy may trigger the onset of insulin-dependent diabetes in children. At least one hormone in dairy has been strongly linked to breast and prostate cancer. Over 50% of school children are allergic to dairy, and 70% of the population is lactose intolerant, particularly people of color. And due to the strong dairy lobby in Washington, this fat and cholesterol-laden food is required eating for all children enrolled in federal lunch programs, which also amounts to nutritional persecution of minorities due to their high rates of lactose intolerance. And yet, most doctors and dietitians still recommend milk every day. The next time you give your child milk and cookies, imagine giving them meat and cookies, because that's exactly what they're getting. We live in a strange world when it comes to eating. Don't you think it's strange that 1/3 of our raw materials and fossil fuels are consumed raising animals to eat? Don't you think it's strange that with the fuel used to create just a single hamburger, you could drive a car 20 miles? Don't you think it's strange that it's actually cheaper to drive a car any distance than to walk that same distance if your calories came from beef? Don't you think it's strange that hamburger, one of the most resource-intensive and expensive foods on the planet, costs less than raspberries? Ever wonder how it's possible that fast food chains can still sell a hamburger for 99 cents? It's possible because of politics. Because our politicians provide massive subsidies to the animal food industries in return for political campaign financing. And without these subsidies, the cost of animal foods would be like it was in the past, and only the wealthy would be eating themselves to death. Because beef steak today would cost over $90 a pound without these subsidies. You may think you're calling the shots when you're preparing meals, but there's a politician in your kitchen, and he's already decided what you'll be eating tonight. In fact, the most health-dangerous eating habit in human history is purely the result of government interference in the marketplace. Not only do animal food industries get subsidies to keep them in business, but they get a determining influence on our nutrition policies as well. The animal food lobbies have had their claws into everything from designing the government food pyramid, to staffing government bureaucracies, to setting our nutritional standards. And having these industries on government committees that decide what's healthy for Americans is like having Joe Camel on a committee designed to help people quit smoking. This is why so many Americans do everything right, yet die from following government guidelines. Food industries spend $30 billion a year marketing their products. The marketing effort to promote natural whole foods is a mere $30 million a year. In other words, we spend over $100 per person each year promoting foods that cause disease and shorten lives, and only a dime promoting foods that prevent disease and prolong lives. The average consumer doesn't have a chance. Between government endorsement of animal products and heavy advertising, the typical American eats like a trained seal, and the training starts early. The average child is exposed to over 10,000 food messages on television every year, and our eating habits are an exact reflection of marketing efforts. Sad as this may sound, the best thing you can do for your child's health is to turn off the television. Not too long ago, Americans thought there was nothing wrong with smoking. Doctors smoked and even recommended cigarettes to their patients.
3 leading independent research organizations made a survey of doctors' cigarette preferences. 113,597 doctors were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" The brand named most was Camel.
According to a nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
Kool cigarettes ran ads that their product actually prevented colds, and the media was filled with health claims for cigarettes. The tobacco industries used doctors to prove their case, and they used health claims in their slogans. As late as 1950, the American medical community still did not think smoking was a factor in lung cancer. And the American Medical Association had a cozy financial relationship with the tobacco industry. And to this day, tobacco executives deny that nicotine is addictive and claim that smoking does not cause lung cancer or any other disease. Today, we have the same attitude about animal foods. Like the tobacco industry, the animal food industries have all had advertisements taken off under court order because they were caught lying. And like tobacco executives, meat, dairy, and egg executives will swear that animal foods have nothing to do with heart disease, cancer, or any other disease, despite the medical evidence to the contrary. What smoking does for your lungs, cholesterol does for your arteries, and the damage is even more lethal. In fact, the link between an animal-based diet and heart disease is not only obvious, but just as strong as the link between smoking and lung cancer. What the animal food industries are doing for American health today is precisely what the tobacco industry did for our health just a few decades ago. Only worse. By subsidizing the animal food industries, the government promotes an eating habit that's the biggest killer in America today. Like the tobacco industry, animal food industries publish phony studies, deny there are any risks involved in eating their products, and fight tooth and nail for every subsidy they can get. Like the tobacco industry, the animal food industries collect billions in subsidies and pocket billions in profits. And the public gets stiffed with higher taxes, disease, disabilities, and premature death. And we pay billions more for health care to treat problems caused by the foods these industries and the government promote. It took a long time for people to wake up to the health dangers inherent in smoking. Increasingly, more people are waking up to the inherent dangers of an animal-based diet. Mainstream advice is to eat more fruits and vegetables. The problem with that is you only have so much room in your stomach. What health authorities should be saying is to replace animal foods with plant foods. The problem with mainstream advice is that it's always at least 20 years behind the times. And when it comes to your health, that's 20 years too late. Just as mainstream advice finally got around to telling people to stop smoking, they will someday get around to telling people to stop eating animal foods. Like it or not, that's where we're headed, and for good reasons. When I first changed to a plant-based diet, I switched overnight, and my diet evolved as I learned more about food. I can't imagine myself ever eating any other way. It's the most delicious and varied diet I can conceive of, and those who think otherwise simply haven't tried it. It's not like you have to eat Brussels sprouts all day. This is really an old-fashioned diet. All you have to do is reorient your thinking about food. We're all attached to our favorite animal foods, and it's difficult to give them up. So if you're unprepared for a complete switch, do the best you can by gradually replacing foods in your diet. I would suggest you first switch to meat, egg, and dairy substitutes because they don't contain cholesterol. And second, eat the old-fashioned way by making animal foods only a very occasional part of your diet until you feel comfortable making a complete switch. It's actually a lot easier than you think. Your diet can evolve, but keep pushing it. The closer you move to a complete plant-based diet, the greater the health benefits. There are all kinds of plant-based or vegetarian diets. The problem with the word vegetarian is, I don't know what it means anymore. Most vegetarians consume dairy. Some eat fish. Some eat eggs. These days, some people even eat chicken and call themselves vegetarians. Vegans eat no animal products whatsoever, but they don't explicitly prohibit refined foods. In other words, you could eat donuts and suck on sodas all day and be a vegan, and some teenage vegans do exactly this. In order to be as explicit as possible, I've come up with the RAVE diet. This is my word, but not my diet, because it follows the guidelines used by doctors to treat and reverse diseases. It's just a simple acronym to help you remember the rules, which are no refined foods, no animal foods, no vegetable oils, no exceptions, and exercise. For more information on the RAVE diet, visit our website, which also gives you references to doctors who use similar diets to cure diseases and bring patients back to health. When you follow the RAVE diet, you'll notice several things immediately. First, you'll discover you are constipated and didn't even know it. Your bowel movements will be easier and more frequent. Be happy! Your body's getting rid of toxic substances on a regular basis. The second thing you'll notice, if you have it checked, is a drop in cholesterol.
Well, the first time I'm in Dr. McDougall's office, he had said, bring your medical records with you. He's looking through everything and he said, I said, what? He said, your cholesterol is high, 236. You know, at that level, you are at as great a risk of having a heart attack and dying of heart disease as you are the breast cancer. Dr. McDougall said, change your diet and it'll take care of the cholesterol as well. 3 weeks later, exactly 21 days later, back in his office, blood test, cholesterol 160. 236, 160 in 3 weeks. No medication, no nothing. Just quit eating the stuff and it goes away.
My own cholesterol went from 372, it's now 124.
The third thing you'll notice is weight loss. What you won't notice immediately are the changes going on inside you. The clearing of fat and cholesterol from your blood vessels, the freer oxygen flow to all parts of your body, the strengthening of your immune system, and many other changes that will make you healthier and happy you adopted a new way of eating. And the changes this diet can make to your health by just opening up your blood vessels can be profound in many different ways. Long before our food revolution, Thomas Edison wrote, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will involve the patient in the proper use of food, fresh air, and exercise." If you ask your doctors what you should be eating to fight arthritis, menstrual cramps, or cancer, they won't have a clue. But they will know what drugs to prescribe. But drugs only treat symptoms. Cholesterol-lowering drugs treat a symptom of a bad eating habit. Treating the cause of high cholesterol means eliminating cholesterol from your diet. The most often heard phrase in the cancer industry is early detection. But that's early detection of a symptom. The real cause of cancer is a weakened immune system that's weakened by the foods we eat. Tragically, the bulk of our vast medical establishment is dedicated to treating symptoms, not causes. And symptoms of diseases that were not even common before 1900. The mutilating surgeries, the billions of dollars spent on drugs, are for the most part treating symptoms of a lousy diet. You might be asking, why doesn't my doctor know about the powerful effects of diet? Simply put, they haven't been trained in plant-based nutrition.
We are not educated, we are not trained, and we are not in any way supported to work with our patient population in terms of education, disease prevention, and wellness. We are trained to focus on fixing the problem after it occurs, not preventing the problem. And that's true of all of medicine these days.
Before you make a life-altering decision, get the advice of doctors who are trained in plant-based nutrition, who are completely reversing diseases by simple changes in diet and avoiding the use of drugs and surgery. Read the books listed at the end, and the next time you visit your doctor, don't be afraid to question his or her advice or seek second opinions. After all, it wasn't that long ago that doctors were advising pregnant women to smoke. A plant-based diet is the oldest diet in the world. The RAVE diet just improves on most plant-based diets by excluding the foods that are at the root of our major diseases today. The human body is a miracle, and it's constantly trying to heal itself from the wounds inflicted on it by an animal-based eating habit. In fact, the whole point of the RAVE diet is to go back to the fundamental foods our bodies evolved with in order to give our bodies a chance to heal themselves. Because the best doctor on the planet is still right inside all of us. Raising animals to eat is the most inefficient, wasteful, and environmentally destructive method of producing food imaginable. This may surprise you, but we grow far more food to feed the animals we eat than we grow to feed ourselves. Farm animals consume 80% of American corn, 80% of American grain, and over 95% of American oats. 87% of our total agricultural land is dedicated to raising the animals we eat. That's almost half of the entire landmass in the U.S. Almost 90% of deforestation is due to our appetite for beef. To date, over 260 million acres of forest have been destroyed to provide cattle with grazing land, and another acre disappears every 8 seconds. The massive amount of crops grown to feed livestock and water pastures consumes over half of the fresh water supply in the U.S. It takes 12,000 gallons of fresh water to produce just 1 pound of beef versus 60 gallons to produce a pound of potatoes. 12 miles of the San Joaquin River in California are now completely dry because water has been diverted to grow crops for farm animals. In some areas, so much water has been diverted from hydroelectric dams that nuclear power plants have had to be constructed to make up for the loss of power. The average American uses just 106 gallons of water a day for domestic needs. But if they eat a quarter-pound hamburger, their daily consumption of water jumps by 3,000 gallons. In the year 2000, the average American consumed 69 pounds of beef and a total of 225 pounds of meat. By giving up meat, you'd be saving over 1 million gallons of fresh water every year. If you added to the price of beef just the water subsidies alone, hamburger would cost $35 a pound. Instead of tinkering with your toilets and shower heads, reducing meat consumption is the best way to conserve our fresh water supplies. Our diet is not only using huge amounts of water, but it's actually depleting our fresh water supplies. The largest source of fresh water in the world will be completely dry in less than 50 years. And once it dries up, the breadbasket of the U.S. will turn into a dustbin. That's the legacy our diet will leave to our children. Eating animals not only consumes half our water, but their excrement pollutes the other half. In fact, farm animals produce 130 times more waste than people do. And yet, not one feedlot or farm in America is required to have a proper sewage system. It's become so bad that animal waste flowing down the Mississippi River has made an area the size of New Jersey totally uninhabitable to marine life. It's called the dead zone. E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and all the other fancy scientific names used to describe food pathogens all boil down to the same thing for the consumer. There's animal excrement in your food. It's become so bad that E. coli is now the leading cause of kidney failure among American children. Modern meat is so burdened with animal waste, you could actually clean it in your toilet. It's safer eating a carrot anywhere but in your kitchen, if meat has been there. Packaged meat now carries a warning label telling consumers to wash everything that's even come into contact with meat. The reason you have to cook it so long is to make sure the animal excrement is safe for you to eat. It's no longer a question of whether there's manure in your meat. It's a question of how to deal with it. The meat industry's answer is not to get rid of it, but to nuke the whole package with radiation. Now, all you have to worry about is getting used to the taste of a mouthful of dead bacteria from fried farm animal feces. We're also depleting our oceans of marine life and setting in motion a trend that some say will result in the whole-scale collapse of marine ecosystems within 40 years. Using sophisticated technology to sweep the oceans with massive nets, we're now taking more fish out of the ocean than can reproduce, and wreaking havoc on the very foundation of life on Earth. The irony is that farm animals eat far more fish than people do. In fact, half of the world's fish catch is fed to livestock. As it turns